All right, fam. Let me keep it real. My name is Will, and this is my first time doing this, so this probably won't be my last time. I'm actually getting started, and I figure it's no better time than right now to actually get into making videos. It's been something I've been delaying for a while. I have a lot of content. I'm always talking. I got a lot of stuff on my mind. So this first one here is going to be real casual. Um, and I'm going to talk about something that happened yesterday. Yesterday, I went down to the college, and my son, one of my sons, he's going through trying to get his plan together. He's going to graduate high school this year, and we were driving down there. And while we was driving down, I was listening to a podcast, and it really stuck with me. Um, and instead of reacting, I really wanted to take the time to process it. Um, anyway, let me get into it again. My name is Will. I'm a husband. I'm a father. I'm an Army veteran, entrepreneur. Um, and what I'm going to be doing is I'm really building under a brand called Born Again Media. And what that means is, just to put it simply, it means that we engage the culture, but we don't let culture control the way that we think. Everything we do really is going to move through three lenses. The three lenses are awaken, align, and act. We awaken to what is really happening beneath all the noise that is going on in the culture today, you know. And then we try to not only awaken, but we want to align, and we want to align our thoughts with the truth, not ego trends and things of that nature. And then after we go through that process, we try to act with discipline, okay? And when we're acting with the spirit of I call grace and truth. And grace and truth for me is like being able to speak with clarity, sincerity, and love. Okay. So this show that I'm starting, which this could, I guess you could say this would be the premiere, but this is really just a dry run. It's going to be practical moments with Will. I'm your boy, Will. Okay. And I think it's probably going to be the most open space that I have because I'm going to have other things that I'm doing. But this is where I'm going to be able to kind of let my hair down and just chill and just really just talk and just say what's on my mind. You know, if it's something that's going on in the culture, I want to be able to talk about it. If it's something that's going on that's spiritual, I want to be able to process it with you. If it's something that's relational, we're going to break it down and we're going to talk about it. Okay. And especially if it's something that's uncomfortable, we don't run. We're going to walk through it, and we're going to walk through it at a slow and steady pace, you know. So, getting back to why I got on here. So, I watched a roundtable, and there's a roundtable with a bunch of black men wrestling publicly with things like masculinity. I think they talked about patriarchy, abortion, discipline, therapy. They talked about monogamy and they talked about love. Some of you might have seen the podcast, and I'll probably put a link in it. Okay. And it really started to get heated. But what struck me the most wasn't that it was getting heated. It was really that it had brought about hope, you know. And the hope for me is that all the men, even though they were voicing their opinions, and you know how it is, the masculine energy and everything, started to get real heated. Nobody shut down and walked away from the table. And that was important to me. You know, what I seen in that podcast, I seen men that were admitting fear. I seen men that admitted that they had lust problems. I seen men that admitted that they were a little confused about some things. I seen that therapy was normalized, and that's a really big thing. And systems, they were also named without abandoning personal responsibility. Because sometimes we'll talk about the system did this, the system did that, but then we don't take responsibility for our part and what we're playing to contribute to allowing the system to do these things. And for me, that whole episode wasn't collapse, which I seen many people commenting about in the comments, but it was really like a recalibration, if you would. It showed me that masculinity is not something that is dying, you know. In fact, I think right now it's being refined. So instead of giving you a hot take that can go viral, you know, what I want to do is I want to kind of just slow it down. And I want to try to bring balance to what I seen yesterday. And hopefully you can go take a look at it and see what you think that you see. Because I think that balance will bring clarity. And you know, and anyway, let's really get into it, okay? So I guess this is where I would cut it, but I'm going to continue to roll on, you know. As I said, my name is Will, and today I want to talk about, you know, what I had watched yesterday, you know, and I watched that roundtable, and these guys was talking about, you know, the issues of um, masculinity, patriarchy, abortion, discipline, monogamy, love. I think those are most of the things that they hit on. And as I said, I'm gonna tell you what really hit me. It was not the normal thing, which what I say is the heat. You know, it wasn't the interruptions. It wasn't that they were getting really loud with one another. But what struck me was again the hope, because they all stayed at the table. And for black men particularly, that's not a small thing. You know, because right now we're living in a time where people leave the room the moment that discomfort shows up. And believe me, I mean, I've been at many tables, and when it starts to get heated, people start to dart off. They don't want to deal with the actual issues, you know. So that's not a small thing. Okay. We live in a time where men, they often disappear emotionally, or they start to get very defensive, or they turn everything into some kind of performance. And I'm speaking as a man, so I'm not trying to like get on, man. I'm just speaking like with clarity of what it is. So when I watch grown men, different ages, different backgrounds, different perspectives, actually sit down and talk about how to love black women better, it really moved me, because I didn't see dysfunction. I saw development. In fact, I seen development in real time. And I need you to hear me when I say this. I mean, I really do. Progress doesn't always look polished. And sometimes we think that way, you know. Sometimes progress looks like unlearning out loud. You know, sometimes progress it starts to look like tension, but tension without the violence, you know. Sometimes it looks like men who don't have maybe the perfect vocabulary, the perfect things to say. As you say, sometimes I get myself even jumbled up, but they do have humility enough to stay in the room. And really, that's what I saw, family. Okay. And to me, that matters. And that's the reason why I really wanted to talk about it, you know, um, because I think for me, when I really think about it, for years, the story has always been black men don't talk. It's been that black men don't listen. Black men don't have the ability to heal. Black men don't change. I mean, I've heard all of these things as a black man, but what happens when we actually sit down? Um, and what happens when we don't run from the so-called hard conversations? Uh, what happens when we don't argue? Um, or even when we do argue, I guess I should say, but we argue not just for the point to win, but really because we want to actually grow. Okay. And I guess to me, that's what this episode or this talk is truly about. I want to celebrate the courage that it takes to have the conversation, you know. And then I want to bring clarity to what the conversation was about from my perspective, because I'm not interested in dog piling on nobody. That's not what I've ever been about. And I'm not really interested in trying to go viral, with, you know, trying to turn this tension into some kind of viral clip. In fact, I got on my shirt. It said, "This is not entertainment. This is transformation." Okay, and I'm really not interested in using somebody else's pain as entertainment. That's not the end game goal of anything that I'm going to do. I'm really interested in extracting the true wisdom in the conversation. I'm interested in naming what was happening underneath the surface, so that we can learn from it. Because ultimately, that's what we want to do. Instead of just reacting to it, and that's often what we do. So here's the thesis for today, if you would, and it's real simple. When men are willing to wrestle with how to love women better, family, that's progress. When men are willing to stay at the table long enough to feel uncomfortable, that's hope. And if we can learn how to do that with more clarity, with more discipline, with more humility, we don't just change conversations, we really start to change families. And if we can change families, we can change communities. And if we can change communities, we can change the next generations. And we can even change what the next generation calls quote unquote normal. Okay. So, again, let's talk about it. Okay. So, the first thing I wanted to do is talk about the cultural level, or the cultural lens of this. Let's take a minute and let's just zoom out. Okay, because if you only watch that round table through, the lens of emotion, you're going to miss the cultural significance of what is truly happening. For decades, the dominant narrative about black men, as I said, has been simple: that they're broken, that they don't listen, that they always avoid accountability. Black men run from their responsibilities, they deflect and try to blame everyone but themselves. Let's keep it real. Y'all know I'm telling the truth. When you hear people talk about the black men, those are the stereotypes, okay? It's been the story. Point blank, period. It's not debatable. And whether it's fair or unfair, that narrative has truly shaped policy. It's shaped the way that we're displayed in the media. It's shaped the educational process, and it even shaped how young black men view themselves, how they look at themselves, and and how they see themselves. So when I watched the conversation, I wasn't just listening to the words, okay? I was really measuring the trajectory, okay? And what I saw was not collapse, as many people thought. It was a shift. Let me explain, okay? What did we actually see? We saw men admitting fear, not posturing, not flexing, not performing, but truly admitting fear. And what was the fear that they was admitting? They admitted that they thought that they wasn't enough. They admitted that they had fears of providing for their families, for their significant other. They admitted that they feared losing their position as a man. They admitted that they was fearful of being wrong. All of that is new, family. I mean, when you really think about it, because we saw men admitting lust, not hiding from it, not dressing it up in some kind of theology, and not blaming women, for their situation, but saying plainly, I struggled. I needed validation. I was chasing a feeling. These are things that they were saying, and I'm quoting. And that level of honesty used to be whispered privately. But now it's being said publicly, and it's not just this broadcast. I've seen other ones. And for me, that's cultural progress. We saw men admitting, I didn't know how to love. Think about that for a second. Just a generation ago, the sentence would have been swallowed. It probably even would have been buried or outright denied. But now you got a grown man, 70 years old, around mentioning I didn't know how to love. And for me, family, that matters. We saw that therapy was becoming normalized. They was actually having a conversation about it. I don't think y'all understand how radical that idea truly is. I go to therapy. I love it. It's beautiful. And there was a time when therapy in the black communities meant that you were looked at as being crazy, or you was looked at as being weak, or the therapy was pray about it. But now grown men are saying I had to go to therapy. My wife pushed me into therapy. My children need therapy. And that's not for me weakness, family. Really, it's evolution. And here's what really stood out to me. They started to name the systems. They talked about slavery. They talked about trauma. They talked about capitalism. And I think they called about this so-called. They talked about this so-called patriarchy. But it really didn't stop there. They also said I had to discipline myself. They said I had to change. They said I had to take accountability. Now, that kind of balance in a conversation is rare because one extreme goes off and it says it all is the systems. It's all about what the United States government did to me or slavery did to me or whatever. The other extreme says it is all personal. Um, it's all my fault. It has nothing to do with the systems. It's all my fault. But I believe that maturity can hold both truths. Yes, systems do shape us, but we still have to choose. Yes, history did wound us, but we still have to respond to the wound. Okay. And for me, that's grown man talk. And that's why I say it was cultural progress, because what we are witnessing right now is not the destruction of masculinity. It is really like, I kind of being home improvement. I think it's like the renovation of it, if you would. So let me say it clearly. Masculinity, in my opinion, is not collapsing. It is it's really in essence recalibrating, you know. Um, because when you really think about it, the old masculinity said, some of y'all a little older than me, and y'all know what I'm talking about. It says dominate. Men don't cry. It says don't admit if you're weak. In fact, I've gotten that counsel myself. Provide the money and nothing else, you know. And sometimes it would say silence equals strength. But what we're seeing right now is a generation that's saying, no, that's not it. Strength might actually mean emotional regulation. The new generation saying that strength might mean listening, instead of being dominant all the time. Strength might actually mean staying when it's uncomfortable. Strength might mean humbling yourself and apologizing. Strength might mean discipline. How about that? So, in my opinion, again, that's not collapse. That's really like a recalibration. Okay. And when you look at recalibration is loud. When a machine is recalibrating, it starts to shake a little bit. You know what I'm saying? When a system is recalibrating, it starts to make a little bit noise. And when someone's identity is recalibrating, it starts to feel a little tense. Okay. But tension does not equal regression. Really, tension often signals growth. Okay. And what gave me hope was this. Again, nobody ran, nobody stormed off. It did get close. They wrestled, yes. And wrestling means something matters. Wrestling means that identity is being examined. You know, wrestling means that ego is often being confronted. And it's tough. You know what I'm saying? Wrestling means that something inside of you, right, is shifting. And to me, that's not broken culture, okay? Not at all. That is really a culture that's in transition. And transition to me is always messy before it becomes stable. Any transition that you go through. So before we start to critique the heat that we seen, before we zoom in and out on those loud moments, and before we start to dissect who interrupted who and who was wrong, the older man was wrong, the younger man was wrong, all that stuff, let's acknowledge the obvious things first. One, black men were talking. Black men were thinking. Okay? Black men are interrogating inherited models. Okay? And black men are questioning what they were taught. And for me, family, that's not collapse at all. In fact, it may be the generational shift that we all need. And again, that's why, I saw hope. And I'm starting to get a little long-winded. And again, that's what this format's all about. It's really about me just taking my time and really just talking to you. So with that being said, let's talk about something else. Why it may have gotten heated. Uh so tension. See, if we're gonna celebrate the courage, we also have to understand why the heat came. Okay. Why did it get loud? Why did the men get defensive in some of these moments? Why did certain words seem to trigger certain types of reaction? Well, that's kind of like what I want to, talk about, and I want to bring clarity. The first thing that we have to understand is identity threat. When you question patriarchy, for some men, they don't hear critique of a system. They hear, you're attacking my whole manhood. Now, again, they may hear something different when you question monogamy. Some men don't hear a discussion about discipline, which, that's what monogamy or any kind of relationship boundary truly is. What they really hear is that you're attacking my morality, okay? And when you start to, question protection, some men don't hear, a reframing of leadership. What they hear is, you're saying that I'm dangerous. And I think by now you could probably see what's happening. The topic starts to shift from behavior to identity. And when identity feels threatened, heat is going to rise. And I don't think that's uniquely a black thing. I think that's really a human thing. Okay? Because if you build your entire sense of worth on being strong and someone challenges your definition of strength, your nervous system reacts before your intellect ever kicks in. Let's just keep it real, okay? I know because I've been there, you see? And if you build your whole identity on being a provider, hello, somebody, at one time that was me, and someone suggests provision is not enough, yo, that could feel real destabilizing. I'm just keeping it real, okay? And think about it. If you were raised to believe leadership equals authority, and someone reframes leadership as a service, that feels like a loss. So, of course, the volume's going to begin to rise, okay? And it's not because men are evil. It's really because identity starts to feel unstable. And when identity starts to feel unstable, the ego is going to try to protect that. I don't care how great of a person you are. And, let's be honest, that's normal. But maturity is learning to sit in that discomfort without letting it control you. You see, that's what we got to do. So let's talk about the second issue that I've seen. And it's something that I see a lot of time in these podcasts. It's undefined language. And this is huge, y'all. Words like patriarchy, power, protection, monogamy, trust. I mean, I can just go on and on and on. Everyone is using these words, right? But not everyone means the same thing when they use these words, okay? That alone is going to cause a bunch of friction. So let's define calmly what these words could mean or what they should mean. I guess I should say. What I said, patriarchy. Patriarchy is not about men existing. It's not fathers loving their families. It's not men leading their households. You know, patriarchy is really a system where male dominance overrides the female agency. So when you think about patriarchy, people, it's like the man's in control, and no matter what the female wants, we take over her agency. And that's different. But leadership is not domination at all. Strength is not about volume, and protection is not control. I guess let me say that again, because people be saying sometimes I don't be clear. Leadership is not domination, y'all, okay? And strength is not measured in volume, okay? And protection is certainly not control. And when those distinctions are unclear, of course, arguments are going to escalate. Because what happens is one person is defending leadership while another person is attacking domination. And they're not even arguing about the same thing, okay? But when you have this kind of clarity, it begins to lower the temperature. When you start to define the terms, you start to reduce the threat. And a lot of what we saw was not disagreement over values per se, it was disagreement over definitions. One man hears patriarchy and thinks they're saying men should lead. Another hears patriarchy and thinks they're saying domination is harmful. Two different interpretations, one heated exchange. But clarity matters. And here's something else that I noticed. Volume doesn't equal conviction, okay? Sometimes volume equals insecurity. Let's just keep it a buck, okay? And sometimes volume equals passion. And you really have to be able to discern the difference. And for me, the key is this. Heat does not automatically mean regression. It really often signals that something deeply rooted is being examined. And that examination sometimes is uncomfortable, especially for us men. Yeah, let's keep it real. Because many of us are not trained emotionally, okay? We are trained to do what? Perform. You know, we're trained to compete. We're trained to provide. So when processing begins publicly, it can look messy like what we seen on that podcast, okay? But messy does not necessarily mean meaningless. Messy can truly mean growth. And here's the deeper layer if you really think about it. When masculinity is being renegotiated culturally, there's going to be friction. Old definitions don't die quietly. Them definitions are going to resist. They're going to defend. They're going to argue, okay? But resistance is often a sign of transition, okay? And that's what we have to understand. Transition is necessary for maturity. So what I'm challenging today is to say, instead of saying, this is why men can't talk, what we need to be saying is, this is what talking actually looks like, okay? It looks like correction. It looks like challenge sometimes. It looks like ego meeting humility. It's nothing wrong with that, you know? And sometimes it's going to look like the volume. But of course, it's going to be, you know, lowered over time, okay? And if you stay in it long enough, you stay in that process long enough, it will start to stabilize. And again, for me, that's what I saw. And that's why I didn't panic. you know, because underneath that heat, there was engagement. And that's big, okay? And engagement means that something matters, okay? So, anyway, I think that we should maybe go deeper because, you know, this conversation isn't just about being cultural. Perhaps we should examine the spiritual layer of this, you know. Um, when I think about the spiritual layer, let's frame it in a way to where we think about power being um, redefined. Okay, so let's go deeper. Okay, because underneath the cultural tension, underneath all that generational friction, underneath the words patriarchy and monogamy and accountability, there's really one central issue I believe that's on the table, and it's power. Okay, um, what is it? Not who has it, but truly, what is it? Because if we don't define, like I said before, words correctly, if we don't define power correctly, we will begin to misuse it consistently. So let's talk about it, okay? Culturally, we've been trained to believe power looks like dominance. Let's be honest, okay? You know, we can walk into a room and we can control the room. We kind of feel like we have a sense of power, okay? If we can win the argument, we feel like we have a sense of power, okay? If we can get our opposition to just shut up, then we feel like we have power, okay? Let's see. If we can out earn, if we can out talk, if we can outperform, come on, y'all. Let's be honest. We feel like we have power. But in my opinion, that definition is very fragile because it really starts to depend on comparison. And it depends on some type of control. It depends on some type of force. And spiritually, that model is going to collapse every single time. Because in the kingdom, power is never domination. It truly is stewardship. Let me say that again for those in the back, okay? In the kingdom, power is never about domination. It truly is about stewardship. It is, I guess you could say, responsibility over something that does not belong to you. That's how I would say it, you know. Yeah, responsibility over something that does not belong to you. And when you think about it that way, it changes everything. Let's go back to my master, Jesus. Okay. Okay. Jesus had authority. He had real authority. In fact, I would even say unquestioned authority. And what did he do with it? He washed people's feet. He didn't try to walk into the room to control the room. He didn't overpower people to prove some kind of vanity point, you know. In fact, he didn't even silence his critics with volume. What he did was he governed himself. And Jesus governing himself is an excellent example of power. Yeah. True power is not the ability to control others. It's the ability to do what? Govern your own self. That's power. Woo! I'm a preacher at heart, y'all, but I'm trying to contain myself. Okay? So true power is not the ability to control others. It's the ability to govern your own self. And that's where the conversation we watch begins to mature, in my opinion. Because if masculinity is built on external control, it will always feel threatened when challenged. But if masculinity is built on internal governance, it starts to become stable. So true power, in my opinion, is self-governed. It is usually spirit-led. It's disciplined, and it's anchored. Okay, and when you think about govern a person who is self-governed, I should say, it means that they don't let their ego outrun them. Okay. Self-governed means I don't let my ego run me. That's what I should say. Okay. Spirit-led means, let's see, I don't let my impulses dictate my decisions. That's what being spirit-led means. And being disciplined, let's get that definition. That means that I don't have to give to every appetite just because I feel it. Yeah. I don't have to give to every appetite just because I feel it. Let's talk about anchored, because I said that too. Anchored means I don't lose myself when the tensions start to rise. All this friction going on, I just, okay, observe, stay cool, calm, and collected. In fact, one of my friends called me chill will. Okay. But anyway, that's real strength. Okay. And when you look at the round table through that lens, you start to see something powerful begin to happen. You start to see men wrestling with the difference between unhealed power and healed power. See, unhealed power demands, healed power serves. Okay. Unhealed power starts to interrupt. Healed power just sits back and listens. Hey, y'all with me? Unhealed power starts to react. Healed power just sits back and regulates. Unhealed power always needs to be right. Healed power just needs to be righteous. Oh man, I'm cooking. Is that what the young people say? So there's a difference, y'all. Unhealed power says, if I admit I was wrong, I start to lose quote unquote status. But healed power, that says, if I admit I was wrong, I'm actually going to gain integrity. And family integrity is authority that cannot be shaken. And in my opinion, that's kingdom order. So when men are sitting in a room wrestling with how to love women better, because that's what it was all about, that is not emasculation. That's truly refinement. Because here's the truth. If a man cannot govern his lust, he cannot lead a household. And that's the truth. Okay? I'm saying it hurts, but it's the truth. And if a man cannot govern his tone, he cannot build safely. Okay? There's no way. If a man cannot govern his ego, oh my goodness, he's definitely not going to be able to steward influence. See, sometimes they tell me I need to slow down because what I'm saying can help somebody. And sometimes I just be going too fast. But anyway, that's spiritual maturity. Okay. And spiritual maturity is not loud. It's just truly steady. Okay. It doesn't announce itself. It really just stabilizes environments. You can truly feel it. You know, you can feel when a man is truly anchored. You can feel when he is truly disciplined. Okay. You can feel when a man is not trying to dominate the room. And what we were watching culturally right now in that tension, we was watching the difference between dominance and stewardship. Stewardship says I must protect what's entrusted to me. Dominance says I'm the head, I'm the alpha, I'm the boss. Stewardship says I'm accountable. Dominance says I deserve to be in authority. Okay, let's do another one. Stewardship says I'm responsible for the weight of the authority that I carry. And I think that shift is the shift that will change everything. Okay. And when you really think about it, that's why I said earlier, masculinity is not collapsing. It is really, in my opinion, just recalibrating. Because when men move from domination to stewardship, they start to truly become that safe place. I'm not talking about being soft, okay? But safe. Safe in regard for the women that they're leading, safe in regard for their children, or we should say children in general, safe for communities, um, safe for leadership. And in my opinion, safety is strength expressed properly. Okay. That's the kingdom lens. Power without discipline is dangerous. Okay. Power without humility is definitely destructive. But power without self-governance is eventually is going to implode family. Okay. But power that is truly self-governed, power that is spirit-led, that is disciplined, and power that's anchored, oh man, that builds. And that's what I'm trying to do with Born Again. That's a little sidebar, okay? But um formation, that's what it's all about. Um anyway, I'm getting long-winded again. Let's go on, move on. Where something I like to do is some kind of relationship application, um, and I guess my idea here is to bring it home, because if all of this starts to stay cultural, or it starts to say um, uh, philosophy or philosophical, it doesn't help like a marriage. It doesn't help a relationship. It doesn't help a household that is struggling and going through things. So, I guess what we have to really ask ourselves the question, like, what does this truly mean in real life? Um, so let me give you three clear statements. Not complicated, not academic, not performative, but really just practical, because that's what you came here for. You want practical um, moments with will. Okay. So let's start with number one. Listening, in my opinion, is very masculine. Okay. I'm pausing because I really need that to land properly. Listening is masculine. All right. See, that's the spirit of God telling me to slow down. Okay. Because somewhere along the way, many men were taught that listening equals weakness. That if you take the time and you just pause, if you don't immediately respond, if you don't defend yourself, they taught us that that means that you're losing your position. And family, in my opinion, that's not strength. That really is like insecurity wearing armor. You cannot protect someone you refuse to listen to. Just, just let that sit for a minute, okay? If your wife is explaining to you how something made her feel, and your first instinct is to correct her instead of understand her, you're not leading, fam. You're reacting. If your girlfriend is trying to express a boundary that she feels like she needs to have, and you turn it into a debate, you're not protecting her. You're protecting your ego. See, listening is not surrender. Listening is actually intelligence. Listening is information gathering. Listening is saying, I care enough about you to understand before I respond. That is truly what masculine maturity is all about. Because a man can, let's say, if a man can regulate his mouth, he can regulate his whole household. Now I'm doing this thing and getting little phone calls in between, so I gotta work on that part. Um, what was I saying? A man who can sit in discomfort without interrupting can build emotional safety for his family, for his woman, okay? A man who can sit in discomfort without interrupting can build emotional safety. And emotional safety is not soft like many people think. I think that it's actually the opposite, it's very strong. See, women don't need to hear louder men, they need to hear regulated men. They need men who don't escalate every conversation into a power struggle. Let's keep it real. And at the round table, it shows something that was very important to me. Men are beginning to understand that very thing. Okay. They're starting to understand that listening is masculine, not because it makes you passive, but because it shows you can govern yourself. And that's important. My point number two. Okay. Sorry, y'all. I'm 45 minutes into this. Discipline builds trust. Now, let's talk about monogamy conversations. Because it really wasn't about sex when you really think about it, at least not from my vantage point. It was really about self governance. See, when a man starts to talk about lust, starts to talk about validation, about wanting attention, what they really are exposing is appetite. And appetite is not evil, but an ungoverned appetite can certainly be dangerous. See, I think that some people don't understand that the whole premise of monogamy at its core is about discipline. It's not about suppression, it's really about discipline. And discipline really builds trust. And see, if a man cannot govern himself, he cannot be trusted with influence. Let me say that again slowly. Okay. If a man cannot govern himself, he cannot be trusted with influence. And I think I said that earlier. Okay. He can't be trusted influence in marriage and ministry and business and leadership, none of those things, because influence magnifies whatever is inside of you. And if inside of you is unregulated appetite, influence is definitely going to expose it. Okay. And if inside of you is insecurity, influence is definitely going to amplify it. See, discipline is not about being perfect, family. It's about being intentional. You hear what I'm saying? People think that a disciplined man or woman is about being perfect. And I don't think it's perfection. I think that it is truly about intention. I should do a teaching on that alone. It's about saying, I don't put myself in positions that weaken me. And that's maturity. That's like playing chess, not checkers. You see, you don't fight temptation every night. You restructure your environment so that you don't have to. You don't test your limits. You start to guard your peace. And when a woman sees that you are disciplined, she begins to relax because she knows on the inside that she is safe, that you are safe. Not perfect, but safe. Okay? And trust is not built on promises, it's built on patterns. And discipline starts to produce those patterns. And family, that's what I call relationship clarity. My third point that I want to make is that accountability is truly love. Okay. And this is the one that really matters when you really think about it. Accountability is love, not accusation, not shame, like many of us think. Accountability. But here's what we have to understand about men. And I know because I am one, okay? Shame starts to freeze a man. When a man feels publicly shamed, his nervous system starts to lock up. That's why a man will get defensive when you shame him. He will get louder. He may shut down. He may even withdraw. And family, that's not growth. That's really paralysis. So what reforms men is grace plus accountability. I think I said grace and truth at one time. Because grace without accountability enables immaturity, okay? Accountability without grace is going to produce resentment. But grace plus accountability is always going to reform a man's character. So when a woman says, I love you, but this behavior is not okay, a man stays instead of exploding. That's growth. When a man says, you're right, I need to work on that, and actually does the work, that's love in action. See, I'm trying to give y'all clarity. Because love is not just about affection. Love is correction with compassion. Love says, I see who you can become, so I won't let you stay where you are. And that's where relationship maturity is truly built from, okay? Not in grand romantic gestures, and that's often what people are trying to do, but really in daily discipline of, doing the things I talked about, like listening before reacting, governing yourself before you start correcting other people, accepting feedback without collapsing your whole world, um, apologizing without losing your identity or losing yourself. Okay, and family, that's strength. That's manhood that is refined. And this is the shift that I saw in the room. Men wrestling with the fact that protection requires listening. Trust requires discipline. Love requires accountability. And again, I say that's not collapse. That's recalibration and action. And when men embrace those three things, what were they? Listening, discipline, and accountability, relationships start to stabilize. Homes start to stabilize. Communities start to stabilize. And that's not just theory, family. That is divine order. But I guess I need to hurry this along. But I really need to talk about the leadership layer of this whole thing that I've seen from this podcast. So let's elevate this for a minute, because it isn't about marriage. It isn't just about data. It's not just about who interrupted who at the round table. It's about leadership, cultural leadership, generational leadership. And whether we realize it or not, we are in transitional masculine era. Let me say it again. We're in a transitional masculine era. And that's what we witnessed at the table, in my opinion. We are standing between two models of manhood. And they're colliding in real time. And you see it all over the place. You see it in politics. I mean, you see it everywhere. Okay. They're colliding in real time. The old model said dominate, provide money, hide emotion, avoid vulnerability, win the argument at all costs, never apologize, control the room. That model built some things, right? But the emerging model is different. Okay. It's not weaker. It's just different. It says lead through steadiness. Regulate your emotions. Practice self-discipline. Stay present in the tension. Listen before you react. Apologize when necessary. Anchor yourself spiritually. And that's not softness, fam. That's really just evolution. And evolution is always noisy, as I said before. Because here's what happens when errors shift. The old model doesn't just disappear quietly. It starts to resist. It's going to argue. It's going to defend itself. It says, if we stop dominating, we lose power. These women gonna take control. I'm just joking, y'all. But the emergent model responds, no. If we don't regulate ourselves, we're gonna misuse power. And that's the clash. And that's what we saw. We saw men who were raised in one model trying to build something new. And that's not dysfunction. That's leadership under construction, okay? And here's a line I want you to remember. Bridges shake while they're being built. Let me say that again, okay? Bridges shake while they're being built, okay? Let that settle, okay? If you stand underneath a bridge that is under construction, it's loud, it's unstable. There's always going to be friction. There's machinery, there's tension, okay? But that noise does not signify collapse all the time. That's construction. And that's the shaking that we saw in that conversation. That wasn't chaos, that was construction noise. The new model of masculinity is being built, and construction is never quiet, family. You don't criticize a building for having scaffolding, you understand it's mid process. And right now, culturally, masculinity is in mid process. Young men are watching. They're choosing between two templates. One template says, be loud, be dominant, chase appetite, win at all costs. The other says, no, be steady, be disciplined, be build trust, I should say. Stay anchored, lead without fear, get aligned. Just to borrow, my phrase, and that's the decision that's in front of this generation. And if mature men don't model the second one clearly, the first one will feel more exciting, okay? Because dominance is flashy, but stewardship is truly quiet. Dominance goes viral. Like if I get on here and I start, doing a whole bunch of stuff, but my video is going to go viral, but discipline starts to build legacy. And that's what I'm trying to do. And leadership is not about volume. It's really about stability. It's about clarity. So let me say something strong here. A leader who cannot regulate himself will destabilize every single thing that he touches, okay? And a leader who cannot sit in tension will fracture every room that he enters. But a leader who can stay steady when challenged, who can lower his voice instead of raising it, who can listen without shrinking, that man is going to build a culture, okay? And that's what's at stake here, family. It isn't about who won the debate. It's about which model of manhood wins the future. And I saw something hopeful. I saw men wrestling instead of retreating. I saw men arguing instead of avoiding. I saw men confronting inherited ideas instead of blindly defending them. And that means construction has truly started. And once construction starts, it rarely starts to go backwards. And that's the good news. So don't be alarmed by the shaking. Understand what the shaking truly is. The shaking is not failure. The shaking is truly refinement. And leadership refined is leadership that is going to last. So as I said in the beginning, there is truly hope. And I want you to understand what the real enemy is, um, and what the real issue is. Because if we misidentify the enemy, we're going to fight the wrong battle. The enemy is not women, okay? The enemy is not men, okay? The enemy is not even in the disagreement. The enemy is not even in the tension. The enemy, the real enemy, is unhealed power. Now, let that sit in a minute. Let that sit, okay? It's unhealed power. That is the true enemy. Because power itself is not evil. Power truly is neutral when you think about it. Power in the hands of a healed person starts to build. It builds people. It leaves legacy. But power in the hands of an unhealed person, that destroys everything that it touches. See, unhealed power interrupts, okay? Unhealed power cannot sit still long enough to truly understand, okay? Unhealed power starts to deflect. It shifts the blame before even looking inward. Unhealed power hides behind systems without doing any kind of self-examination. It says, it's the culture, it's the government, it's history. And while those things do matter, it avoids the mirror. Michael Jackson, I started with the man in the mirror. Okay, anyway, unhealed power uses anger as an armor. It raises its voice when it feels exposed. It escalates when it feels small. It performs strength instead of embodying it. And family, that's not masculinity. That's insecurity with volume. And here's the truth. Unhealed power doesn't just hurt women. It hurts men too. It isolates them. It freezes their growth. It keeps them stuck in a cycle of defensiveness and ego protection. Unhealed power is loud, but it's fragile. But healed power, it listens. Not because it's weak, but because it's secure. See, healed power regulates. It doesn't let impulse control the room. Healed power accepts correction, not because it enjoys being wrong, but because it values growth over pride. Healed power stays in the room. I think that might be the most important one. It stays, okay? It stays when it's uncomfortable. It stays when it feels misunderstood. It stays when it feels challenged. It stays. Because it understands that walking away protects ego, but staying builds strength. And that's the real shift that's beginning to happen. So it's not a gender war, okay? It's a shift from unhealed power to healed power. And that shift is uncomfortable because healed power requires humility. Healed power requires discipline. Healed power requires emotional maturity. And emotional maturity is not glamorous at all, okay? Emotional maturity is slow. It's quiet. It's doing that internal work, but it's powerful. Okay? Because once a man learns to govern himself, he starts to become safe. Safe for who? His wife, his children, his leadership, the influence that he holds. And safety is strength that is properly expressed. So when you saw the interruptions and when you saw the heated exchanges and when you saw the moments of ego, don't panic, family, okay? Recognize the transition that's happening because the real story wasn't the flare ups. The real story was the men were wrestling with their power. And wrestling means something inside is shifting. And I'm sure every one of them walked away different, okay? And we if we keep nurturing healed power instead of rewarding loud dominance, the culture will begin to stabilize. And family, that's the shift. That's the hope. And that's what's happening. Okay. So I done talked a lot. I done talked a lot more than I anticipated. And hopefully I'll be able to segmentize this and maybe do the long form. But the practical moments with Will, that's what it's really all about. It's about me just being able to just ramble. Okay. But let's land this plane because this has definitely gotten lengthy. Um, because I don't want this episode to feel like a critique. I want it to feel like clarity. What I had watched with them guys was not perfect, but it was truly progress. It wasn't quiet, but it was honest. And honesty is where reform truly begins. Not performance, not in perfection, but truly in honesty. When men say, I didn't know how to love, when men say, what do they say? Oh, I struggled. When men say, I had to learn how to discipline myself. When men say, I was wrong, um, in my opinion, that's not weakness at all. That's reform in motion. And reform is always louder than comfort, as I said. So instead of zooming in on what or who interpreted who, um, um, uh, who interpreted whose vantage point or um, who was right and who was wrong or even who interrupted who instead of responding in the comments and replaying those heated moments, instead of turning the tension into drama. I want to acknowledge what really happened and I want to reframe it for those who may not have seen it. Black men stayed at the table. They wrestled, they disagreed, they challenged each other, but they stayed. And if black men can stay at the table long enough to feel uncomfortable, families can definitely get stronger. Leadership can definitely get steadier. And love can truly get safer. And that's the real victory and the takeaway for me. Not the agreement, okay? Not uniformity, but engagement, okay? Because hope isn't agreement. Hope is staying. Hope is wrestling instead of retreating. Hope is recalibration instead of collapse. And what I saw was not a culture breaking down. I saw a culture under construction. And construction is loud before it's beautiful. So don't fear the noise, understand the process. You know, masculinity is not dying, it's truly maturing. Power is not disappearing, it's being refined. And if we keep choosing healed power over unhealed dominance, we don't just fix conversations, we start to rebuild trust. We rebuild safety. We rebuild order. Family, that's work. That's hope. And that's the direction that I want to see us go in. And I guess if I guess that be my close, because honestly that's what it was truly all about. I wanted to talk about this, and look, I mean, this is my first time doing this, so it wasn't as smooth as I may have wanted, but it wasn't as perfect, but and neither was that podcast, but it was progress. um that podcast wasn't quiet, but it was honest. And as I said before, honesty is where um, reform truly starts to begin. All right, so I guess now I should take the time to tell you a little bit about Born Again Media. Um, I'm trying to think of how I should do it. Okay, I probably cut this, but I just go ahead and wing it. Okay. Um, this is what we do here. What I just talked to you about. Okay, we take controversial cultural moments and we slow them down. Okay, we're gonna take shows like I just watched in my leisure time, and I'm gonna respond to them. We're gonna extract the wisdom, remove the noise, and then rebuild the order. See, I'm not trying to build with Born Again Media a movement of outrage. It's really a place where I'm trying to build a formation space, if you would. It's really about growth. It's about discipline. It's about becoming safer, steadier, stronger without becoming harder. And it's my vision with Practical Moments with Will, um, to do that. But this is just one lane where I'm trying to do it. So if you're looking for loud, you're not going to find it here. If you're looking for clarity, then I welcome you to come here. Follow the page that's coming. Okay. Share the conversations. And most importantly, stay at the table. If you're in a situation to where you're having a heated debate or argument or whatever, don't run away. Start to analyze and ask yourself the deeper questions so that you can have some kind of real transformation. Stay at the table, because hope isn't in the agreement, hope is in the engagement. Anyway, I'll see you next time. Peace.